are actually at not 41st and 47th. We're at 47 or 48th MGD session. And besides hearing all these stories, now almost everything is up on YouTube. And we're trying to build this up and put it onto a website later on. So we have all these stories there. And more than all that, it's like a reunion. As you can see, it's connecting back when you're seeing faces after so long. And bigger part of the viewership happens on FB. Most of the sessions are going to 500 as an average, and then it goes on to YouTube. So like Pradeep's session yesterday is almost touching 1,000. So it's quite interesting, and the amount of interaction. And there are people you don't know about or haven't heard about. So we're trying to take it across as many batches as possible. So on that note, I'm going to pass on to the professional host. Roma is now a seasoned host. And Roma, over to you, and you can start off the session.
So it seems on Main Gate Darbar, if you host the second time, you become seasoned. So that's a good, I'm happy
straight away elevation.
I'm happy to be seasoned. So hello everyone and welcome to Main Gate Darbar. So this evening we have my beloved batchmates Himalini and Santayan with us. Himalini was my roommate also, and they are going to share their quarter-century journey with us, okay? Not just as independent designers, Himalini is a communication designer, Santayan is a product designer, but also as a couple. And they brought their combined talent, intentions, and skill to the complex and continuous work there is in the area that they've chosen to put their skills to, which is the area of social change and in the social sector development, basically. Together they run Thought Shop Foundation, which is based in Kolkata. It's an NGO that's dedicated to creating effective ways of dealing with social and taboo issues. And these issues would be issues to do with gender, sexuality, identity, abuse, violence, and frankly, anything else that they discovered along the way that needed to be addressed in order to facilitate what they were looking to facilitate, which is lasting change in communities and cross-generational change. So over the course of 2 decades or so, they've actively supported an evolving yet very solid network of marginalized communities. These are in rural areas, semi-urban or peri-urban as it's called technically, and urban slums of Bengal, which they'll tell us more about. And they've done this primarily by listening to and addressing the needs of the youth. Despite the risk and the social pressures against it and involved, confronting the elders in communities and so on and so forth. So I'm excited to basically find out and investigate and probe how they've managed to navigate these tricky waters. And basically, Santayan and Himalini, the nation wants to know exactly how you've gone about doing this, okay? Because
I told you she's seasoned.
Okay, because you've been very strong and silent for over 2 decades. And even though we've been in touch, we've not really talked shop. Our batch is such that when we gather, we don't talk shop, right? Very much. So we go back to the antics of our foundation year, basically. So the nation wants to know, and I'm hoping to find out all the details. And what it seems to be that using their design education, they've been able to kind of improve lives directly from the root up. And they've done all kinds of things, you know, beyond the scope of necessarily what our design education gave us. So they've counseled, then they've devised games, they've created music, they've used technology to support communities. And within these communities, they've inspired individuals. It's been like 2 decades, right? So kids who came in younger, they've inspired them to take on leadership roles and step up into being leaders within their communities. So the gamut of the scope of intervention has been pretty broad, very, very broad, beyond the scope. I mean, consistent actually with what we were taught was design thinking, but they've applied it specifically, and we'll find out precisely how. Along the way, they've creatively countered very serious issues that these communities face things like trafficking, violence, discrimination, and more. So let's get straight to it. I'm not going to go on with the introduction. And Santayan, in his quintessential way, has devised a very fun way for us to get started. So Santayan, over to you.
Thank you, Roma.
You're welcome.
You know, when we hear it from you, it sounds like, gosh, who's this? But it's not like that.
It is.
So
It is.
the nation wants to play.
Yeah.
So we have a game here. I'm going to share my screen. It's a very silly game. I'm warning you. Can you see the screen? Hang on.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you have 8 cards. 4 belong to me, and all the rest are Himalinis.
Okay.
Now, the cards are, they represent stories.
Okay.
And there are 4 columns, NID being the watershed moment. NID is in second position, and there is before NID and after NID, and now and hereafter. Okay, so it's in a bit like a chronological order. Now the game is that you have to turn over a card, any card you wish. And if you want to go chronologically, that's your prerogative, or you can go haywire. And but to win points, you'll have to turn over all the cards before we hit 45 minutes.
Okay, maybe I'll forgo winning points because I'm not going to be rushing through this. We'll see.
No, we'll have to set a time.
Okay. 45 minutes. I'll make a note.
Or 50 minutes, whatever you choose.
Fine.
Fine. Okay.
Okay.
If we win the game, that is turn over all the cards before time, we each get 8,000 points, which we can redeem anytime you come to Calcutta. You get coffee and meals and hugs from us.
Perfect. Sounds good. Sounds good.
So that's the game, and so there are some other rules. We will get into the complexities later on. Right now, just to get started, which card do you want to choose?
So I'd actually like to start with Santayan. Start with the here and now. Exactly what? Number 4. What's going on now at Thought Shop Foundation in the work that you guys are doing? And Himalini, feel free to pitch in.
Yeah.
So this picture is, we had developed a game called Women's Economic Empowerment, which has been played in various countries thanks to Oxfam. And here we are trying it out with the group in Bihar, women's group in Bihar. So just to give an overview, we basically have been developing tools. There is a tool there on farming, and the picture at the bottom is women in Chhattisgarh. This is Jharkhand. They are using our tool to learn more about farming. The picture on the top right is about a group in Burma, Myanmar, playing the identities game and having a lot of fun. So my stories are all about the various tools that we have created.
So basically, my question about the tools is, you said Myanmar. So basically, are you using similar tools across different geographies?
Yes. So let's, you want to get into the tools directly?
Some overview might help.
Yeah.
You want to mention?
Yeah. So I think what we've been doing is there are 2 aspects to our work. So one is this development of tools and games to address social issues. And the other is our work with communities, where we've been basically working to build youth leaders and taking them through a journey to bring change in their lives as well as the communities where they're based. So we'll talk more about that, I guess, as we go along.
So, okay, so let's get a glimpse of the kind of tools we have developed. This is a clutter of all the different kinds of games and tools. Here we see something about child rights, something about child marriage, on the laws, on gender. We have workbooks for kids to explore themselves. This is a game on, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
If I point like that, yeah?
Yeah.
So this game is Women's Economic Leadership. It's a business simulation, so women can play a game where they take risks and see what rewards they get. And it is weaves in aspects of gender in that. Storybox is a gender game. This is a game on farming. The idea being that tribal women learn about newer methods of farming through pictures. Also about farming. This is on vegetable farming for the same group. So this is the kind of, so here is a picture of games being played in Myanmar, one workbook that we have developed for on water sanitation being used in Uganda. This is Zambia, yeah. And identities work happening in Pakistan. Yeah.
It's fabulous that you've reached such a wide range of people. And what I'm curious to know about is, and we can get back to it later, is have you had to adapt the games for these different kinds of situations and different contexts, or is the same game managing to permeate, or is it universal? Is it working in various places?
Early on in our work, we realized that scaling up requires some universal application. So till very recently, when we started working, the idea was that all images, all games, everything should be hyper local so that it speaks to the people whom you're speaking with. But that makes it bound within that culture. And it's very hard to scale up. Then you have to go from Bengal to Odisha, you might have to do a whole lot of changes. From Odisha to Rajasthan, you might have to do another set of changes. Becomes very expensive to deal with that kind of a thing. Also, there are advantages of not making it hyper-local. For example, when you're talking about very sensitive issues like violence, sometimes it feels, when the community sees their own pictures, their own culture, and it feels like somebody is pointing a finger at them, or they can get defensive. So it helps to be a little. It could be somebody else's story, but does it relate to your story? Kind of a thing.
So the games are basically triggers for storytelling, is it? You get people to open up and talk about what's going on in their lives in a safe kind of way.
Yeah. So what the games do is basically create a space for conversation, to have difficult conversations in a non-threatening space. Right. And our thing is that change happens through these conversations, where in other spaces it can become very contentious. Through a game method, people can open up, relax a little bit more, and be in a mood to mitigate, or when there is a disagreement, because it's happening within a game environment, it's easier to listen to each other and disagree and agree and things like that. So we use game as a strategy to break through that, the resistances of taboo issues. Fantastic. That becomes a very important thing. So also when you were asked,
and it's been successful, the use of the game and the development of it, I would be curious to get back to. So as far as the game you've set up for us to play, can I go back now to the cards that you had offered me? And can I pick number 5? So Himalini, for before NID. Can you tell me a little bit, about what's going on here, other than you looking very cute? But basically, from the context also of the kind of work that you're both doing, and now you specifically, the kind of work that you're involved in, are there routes because it requires a lot of commitment and a lot, in my understanding of working in the social sector, because I think it's not like you design a bottle and you put it out in production and you see it in the market. It's change, and that's a long process till you actually see some of the rewards of maybe what you're doing. This is what my guess is. So it takes commitment, I'm assuming, and I'm wondering if there's you can tell us a little bit about your childhood, or what the roots of this area of interest are, where it's coming from.
Yeah, so if you see the pictures on screen,
Yeah.
That's me with I think this is one of the earliest pictures I could find. That's me and that's my brother, and this one as well. And I think when I was thinking back to try and see, okay, what has been a big influence in my life, in my childhood, I have to say that I think my immediate family, we were a very close-knit family, and my brother particularly has been a very important member of that family, who's sort of governed a lot of my choices along the way. And my brother was born with cerebral palsy, and so we had this kind of relationship where he was my older brother, but also my younger brother, because cerebral palsy meant that while he had cerebral palsy as well as mental retardation. So he was like a physically grown person with the mind of a little baby. And I think that at the time that my brother was born, there were no schools or institutions in India who could even diagnose correctly what he was going through. And so the early part of my
that would be the 70s.
My brother was born in the mid 60s. So around that time, there were no schools or institutions addressing cerebral palsy, and it took my parents many years to actually find the help that they needed. And I think I was born 4 or 5 years later, but even then they were still grappling for the right support. But eventually my brother and I joined a school for special education, and my parents were very instrumental in actually building that institution. And I think that is where I saw the role of design in a way, because everything was specially designed there for every child, right from the spoon to the furniture to the clothes. Everything required to be specially created. And so I think my brother has played a big role in my choices along the way. And yeah,
and you have memories of, like you saying, everything needed to be designed, and that process, and at that stage you're saying your parents also, there was no real support networks, and they were instrumental in creating that for themselves and for others, I suppose. So what was the kind of input that they were getting to help themselves and each other? Were they being designers and creators themselves?
So yeah, I mean, but that happened actually. I think around 1974, the school was formed, and my mother joined as a volunteer, and my father got involved in fundraising. The school began with 2 children, and in a garage, and it was like a very basic thing. The parents were setting it up and whatever. And I think it was just through I think by learning, by doing kind of thing, that they sort of discovered how to solve problems that came their way. And later, of course, my mother went and got trained in special education, and that equipped her more. And as a child, I grew up, So that's a picture of the school early days. There were 10 children, and that's my brother, one of the 10 children. And that's a picture of a school concert. And I used to be involved in their school concerts. I would be the voice for some child who can't speak, or help some child move around. Right. And this is a picture of a sports day with my brother being egged on by my mother, and that's me at the back. So I think the school was a big influence in setting the tone at that point.
Right.
And I think the other thing that would happen was, because this was still, usually children with special needs were hidden away in homes, and people weren't accustomed to seeing them. So when we would travel out anywhere, we would have a lot of people staring or making fun, and my mother's response to that would always be that, don't judge them, because they don't know and they don't have awareness, and we need to raise awareness. And I think I've heard this so many times in my childhood that I think this is one of the reasons why I felt like I want to get in NID and raise awareness on issues, because it was just something that affected us so personally in our lives at that point.
So you're saying in some ways you had clarity on what you wanted to do specifically, even before you applied to, or when you applied to NID, even how you wish to utilize the design education. You had that clarity right from the start?
Yeah, in fact, I think I said this even in my interview when they asked me, so why do you want to study design? And I think I might have, I think I did say that. Right. This is how I want to apply it. Right. And yeah, so yeah.
Is there any other, something about the Montessori you want to?
Yeah, so that the picture there is of Montessori school. I think that's also my first one, early pictures of school. And so Montessori school, I loved it. I was there for 5-6 years. This is a Mongrace Montessori house in Calcutta. And this little girl sitting at the end, she used to be my best friend. She joined school and would cry every day. And so one of the days when I went to pick her up, and she saw me and stopped crying, and so I was admitted instantly. And that's when I got admission into school.
Okay. Yeah. Let's go with
Incidentally, there's a little bit of a digression here. The Mongrace Montessori was on Short Street. Short Street had this Montessori school, and then there was St. Xavier's where I studied. So there was a period in 1972 to 1973 when I was in class 1 to 2. She was also studying in Montessori just outside the gate, which we later discovered.
Really?
So, yeah.
No, and in fact, I mean, through our time in NID, I had no inkling of any romance, even though Himalini was my roommate between the two of you. And I know Himalini said, please don't talk about this on the Zoom thing, but I'm the host. And I guess I'm a seasoned host, so I can do what I want. And why don't we move now to then your post-NID days, immediately after?
Who? Santayan or Himalini?
Santayan now.
Santayan.
There you go. So we were trying to figure out how long it took us to graduate. We joined in 88, and our by the time I had my jury, it was 96 December. I think 97 April we convocated. Morarji Desai died that year, and the convocation was cancelled. Things like that. So when I was I had just finished my jury, and the jury had told me that, okay, you can go ahead and convocate. That evening, Sanjay Sarkar called me up from Bombay. He was already working in Bombay in some place. He said, hey, Santayan, you're done. NID is done. I said, yeah, kind of. You want to come and join us? He said, yeah, okay. And it happened to be Tata Interactive Systems. I worked there for 3 years. When I had joined, by the time Sanjay had joined, Manisha was already there and had impressed Tata Interactive Systems so much that they said, the CEO said, get me as many NIDians as you can. So I just walked in to the job. I didn't do any negotiation with my salary or anything. I was just happy to just land a job like that. And the work there was basically development of, they did what was called computer-based training. So for various organizations, they would do visual, like the kind of thing we are seeing on screen, much more interactive and coded and all that. I learned coding there, and it was great fun. But one of the first projects we did there was a game for a company called VTech. VTech used to make these keyboards for children. And they used to supply CDs, compact discs with the keyboards that you could use to play games using the keyboard that they would have supplied. So we developed a set of musical experiences for children, which was in a disc, which was my first, I really enjoyed it because it was music, it was education, it was kids, it was coding, and it was great fun. So that was a period of 3 years, but the picture here is soon after that, we moved to Ranikhet.
But straight after NID, you went to Bombay, basically Tata Interactive 3 years. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I said, yeah.
And that was, and your tryst with technology in NID, there was no coding or any related work, right?
No.
Okay.
So during the project, there was a guy called Swale Fatehi. He would sit and he would code and he would talk aloud while coding to explain to himself and also to me why he is doing. So we'll set a variable and this is a zero based array and blah, blah, blah and all that. And I would just sort of follow it like a football match and try to understand what's going on. And it was so interesting. So I got interested in that.
But even in your
around the third year,
your involvement in the thought shop work also, there's a lot of the technology part of it also you basically are involved in. You've spoken a little bit about data and aggregating information, etc., from your communities and creating formats for that. So
yeah, I've always been trying to inject some work in which I could do some technological thing. So I made an array of Flash-based games to teach kids letters or vocabulary or things like that. And now Flash is obsolete, so it's very hard to retrieve those. But I did everything with the website for the last 19 years. So every iteration of the website, all the content, all the coding, and it was HTML in those days, no template. So actually writing code by hand. So it was fun in the beginning, not anymore. Around the third year of my time at Tata Interactive, Natuji landed up one day and he had just been to Ranikhet. And he had worked in an organization called Grassroots. I said, oh, it's beautiful. It's just under this mountains. Is Nuts here somewhere? I don't know. Una will be there. It was great fun. So I said, I was curious, but I had no idea of that I would go there.
Right.
But when work started changing, I said, this is interesting. I should check it out. So Amitabh, Radhika, they went for a trek to the hills, and I said, I'll hop along and I'll drop off at that Grassroots place to see what's going on. And when I went there, it was so marvelous. It was next to a golf course and just at the foot of a hill, and you could see the whole range from there. And I said, whatever the work is, I'll just take it. And so they said, yeah, okay, come. They were very appreciative. Kalyan and Anita said, whenever you want to join, there is a group of boys. So this is a carpentry unit they used to have. Because they were in the hills, they used to get a lot of exotic wood. Every farm would have had a fallen tree and they would have to sell locally. Otherwise it's, so, and all these boys were local carpenters making door jams and window sills kind of a thing.
Right.
So the idea was to take some of them and upgrade the skill to make furniture that is simple. Of the kind of wood they had was very, very good, like pine, good quality pine is the cheapest material there. You had deodar and the cedars and the hardwoods. So using that material to create furniture that would fetch a higher value. So you would make furniture and then go to Dastakar and sell some of that furniture there.
And you were designing the furniture?
So we would look at, there was some catalog, I would look at the catalogs, try to reverse engineer some of them. They had already a history of some furniture they were doing. I would try and optimize them in some ways. There was a couple of furniture that they couldn't figure out. It just wouldn't fold flat or, so
Right.
try to troubleshoot and problem solve,
Right.
those kind of things. But all with hand tools. There are no power tools, no power saw, so it's quite a different kind of work environment. But it was great fun.
Very exciting. I think actually a product designer's dream, it sounds like, right?
Yes.
Workshop kind of scenario.
And I wasn't making furniture myself. I was just telling them, this needs more planing and that. So it was very easy in the beginning. And I would just chill in the golf course whenever I got the chance. Then Nuts went and told Himalini that, there's a place in Ranikhet, and she also, then we figured something happened then at that point of time, and we figured we would move to the hills and work.
So I think I was also getting restless of being in Calcutta and working in a city, and I wanted to work with communities, be away from the city basically. And my work with grassroots at that time was to promote appropriate technology. So it involved going to communities and convincing families to consider using biogas and helping them choose what kind of water supply system and sanitation, and so basically promoting appropriate technology. And that meant a lot of spending time with communities in their homes, with families, because biogas was about convincing them to change the way they cook, which is like such a daily habit, and not every family can also adopt that. So it was also to live with the family and see whether they could actually change and move to biogas. And then it involved also creating tools to help other from the organization go to multiple families, tell them about the pros and cons, convincing them and all of it. So my work involved creating tools as well. But I think in Ranikhet, the whole experience of living there was so overwhelmingly important, because also it was like we were living in a tiny one room little hut, beautiful thing on the edge of a hill, and we had nothing. It was like a very basic life. We had no fridge, no computer, no telephone. There was no telephone at that point. We used to have to go travel to this town, and there was one STD booth, stand in a queue and make a call home once a week. Once a week we would go to the market and read the newspaper and all of it. So whatever you...
So was this also the setting for the romance to bloom, which I'm also keen to investigate? I know you said not allowed, but just a little bit.
Yeah, so actually in NID, the last few years, Santayan and I had gotten involved with each other, but then he went back to Bombay, I went back to Cal. We didn't really know how, how we could make a life together. But in Ranikhet, suddenly it was like, okay, this all made sense, It was like this.
It's absurd. Both of us found it very it making sense, but now it's like, it's We just found it.
Yeah, so in Ranikhet, it all fell together. It was like a 2-year honeymoon kind of a thing. That's where
Pre-wedding honeymoon.
Yeah, before the wedding.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, this is the life that makes sense. We're working with communities. Our friends were all the village folk. We had no distractions, and it was just like you had to do everything yourself, like cook and clean and shop and whatever. And you ate with
that last part was good practice for lockdown, I must say. The cook and clean and shop and do everything on yourself, right?
Yeah, but the thing was that at that point we had no
lockdown
fridge.
30 years later. We're way ahead in the curve.
Yeah. No, so there we didn't have any fridge or anything. So whatever you cooked, you had to eat and finish at that meal. And it used to be so cold that we used to just eat off the pan practically, because it was like too. So yeah, it was a crazy.
It was wonderful.
It was a lovely thing.
Sounds magical actually, because we just did a brief trip to close to Ranikhet, a place called Hartola, and the sky is so studded with stars that it provokes that childhood thing of when you looked up and there were so many stars, and you kind of feel not just the insignificance, it's not just the fact of the stars, it's the number of them. It was a blanket of stars, you could barely see space between. So it's incredible. Must have been magical times.
And that's the honey work is also something that.
So eventually what happened was the carpentry unit, for various reasons, had to shut shop, because some of the skilled guys had moved on, and we found ourselves in a new role, which had very little to do with product design, but we were applying design thinking as far as we could. What they wanted us to do was to rediscover honey farming, or to re-energize honey farming in that area. So what that meant was we would have to take our little Maruti 800 midnight blue car and set off early in the morning, 7:30, and travel 30 kilometers in the hills, up and down, playing tal on the, that Rahman music track that was, we just played it over and over again. And just look out of our car and see that, is there a farmer who has a bee box near his house? And if he has, then we'll just stop and say, hello, what is, how are you doing? How's your bees? Are you producing any honey? Would you like to be part of a cooperative?
And then we would taste honey, collect a sample, bring it back.
Right.
That was, and then package it, and the marketing and all of that.
So the interesting thing about that honey.
So the cooperative was already established, and you were getting more people involved in it. And
no, there was no cooperative. Actually, many years ago, honey farming used to be like an alternative livelihood in those communities. And then there was some disease, all the bees died. And now we were basically trying to explore whether it could be revived. And so it was the beginnings of setting up of a cooperative. And it was actually doing the scouting to explore the potential for that.
So this is
the interesting thing about the honey is that, the honey that you normally get in the market is all blended. And these farmers, because honey is actually a byproduct of a larger thing. The main purpose of the bees is to cross-pollinate and make, for better fruits. So these farmers would have the bees in specific flowers amidst specific. So they would have lychee honey or sunflower honey or mustard honey, which are slightly different tasting flavors. Yeah. And so we would keep them separate and market it as such. It was a very, very small operation. It was like a action research kind of a thing. But the point was that we, at one point of time, I remember driving down, and it was like at 9 o'clock in the morning, beautiful sun, blue sky. And we said, this is a commute to work. If this is our commute to work, this is the kind of work I want to do all my life. And I really thought I'd be there for the rest of my life. But there were,
what
had other plans.
Okay, but also it's the experience of working in a community, like you said, and a small community at that, a hill community, would have probably served as a good learning ground for the work that you later did, and in terms of creating communities in Bengal, in these urban areas, semi-urban areas as well. So we'll get into that also later. Should we go back to the cards and see what else I can pick? Santayan, let's start with your childhood. Let's do number 1.
Okay.
That's an adorable picture.
We were all cute as babies, no? Baby picture is cute. So the bottom one is me, and that is the time Himalini probably Mongrace just outside the gate, doing her Montessori. Studied in St. Xavier's from class 1 to class 12. No other school, no moving about, no nothing. St. Xavier's was good. It was gave me a grounding, but I must tell you that till class 6, I wouldn't be able to speak English because my home, everybody spoke Bengali. And so English would be a struggle. I wouldn't be able to hold a conversation. So in class 6, we moved to a part of town where there were non-Bengalis, and I had to struggle and learn some, and eventually then became fluent. So school was okay. I had interest in a lot of things, physics, biology, but I'm a classic jack of all trades, master of none, which I've reconciled to. I think it's a great way to enjoy life. So my childhood influences, basically my grandfather, this is my paternal grandfather, all the technical and I think the technical genes are from the father's side and the musical genes are from my mother's side. Okay. My maternal grandfather used to be a classical singer. I never heard him sing. Apparently he used to play the flute also. I've not heard all that, but it's sort of trickled down and in some way gotten into my bones. My grandfather on my father's side was a gold medalist in chemistry from BHU, where he didn't find a job that was worthwhile. So he was working in a cosmetics factory in Bengal, where they used to make these transparent soaps. And I remember all the cosmetics at that time in our house. So one of the moisturizing creams were named after my sister. So I really have fond memories of that transparent soap, and I still use that transparent soap. Right. Also during that my childhood, Bengal was going through a period of political upheaval, which I've heard of. I don't know if it has influenced me. They say that by the time you're 2 or 3, everything is formed, and so things were happening. Major things were happening at that age. So, for example, the Naxalite movement had just begun, and the place we were in, the neighborhood we were staying in, was a Naxalite hideout, and there would be like gunfights and major violence in my childhood. Apparently, I used to run.
I mean, that sounds extremely volatile.
It was, and it was like there would be our houses, their neighboring houses would be either hiding or encouraging Naxalites. These are young people who believed that incremental changes doesn't work. You have to use violent means. and there would be gunfights, and the government also responded with a lot of ugly violence. And I mean, both sides were the same.
So how do you think this any link between your experience of the way the Naxalites are taking on change, right, social change in a revolutionary way, and then how you and Himalini have decided to go with hopefully the sustainable method, which is, what is that experience like for you? Is it does that seem like two opposites, right? It's slow and steady, certainly, the kind of approach that you're taking, but hopefully sustainable. And what do you feel about the two approaches?
So for the longest time, I wasn't aware of the Naxalite ideology. I didn't know it, and my father particularly was very much against it. He did not want. So communism for him was not, it was not something to aspire for. Though we had members in our family, my uncles who were members of the Communist Party. So I wasn't aware of it for the longest time. I think the only thing I got from that was violence. That there is violence, and my parents telling me. So, for example, during the Diwali Kali Pujo that we have, the firecrackers, I used to always want a gun, and my parents said, "No guns for you. You just have to deal with it." And throw tantrums and all that. But once that was weeded out of me, it was good. I think otherwise I might have been, a gun fanatic or something. I don't know. So later on, when I think back, I think I sometimes understand that frustration that when you need change, and it feels like how long are you going to wait for change to happen? You need a quicker way. And sometimes Himali says, let's bomb the whole place and restart. And so, but I think I have subscribed to that NIDian ideology, the Gandhian ideology. And I think that makes sense to me. And change requires collaboration, and scaling up requires a sustained collaboration of a lot of people.
Right. So let's go back. Let's move forward again now to the kind of change work that you're doing, because we're at 7:50. So I want us to focus a little bit more. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to the tools. You want to talk about community now?
Yeah.
So this is what our team looks like. Part of our team looks like now. Lots of people.
A little bit also about the build-up, about how you came to this point where now you're working with. I think there are 10 or more communities, over 1,500 people that you're actively involved in, whose lives you're actively touching in one way or the other, using these tools that you've developed, using music, using various means that you have designed, right, to engage with them on various sensitive issues. So also just give us a sense of the trajectory, the growth from where it began to where it is now, and then some of the challenges that you face, and maybe also speak to specifically what's happened in recently with the lockdown, and I think there was a cyclone as well, right? So how you were able to reach these communities because you'd already had roots and networks placed there, and active and engaged people within the community who were right there. So it's not like external help coming in. It's just that people there who are receptive and able to step up.
So brief history is like when we started in 2000, we were grappling with this thing of social change. And at some point of time, we thought that we were working on the principle of behavior change. How do you change the behavior of people? And one of the things was that it's better to start with young people whose behavior is still forming, rather than break your head against older people who have already got some set ideas of how to view life and what to do about it. So we started working with young people, and the first couple of years we tried engaging young people from the neighborhood schools and colleges, and we had we discovered later that it's better to work with young people from communities for sustainability, because these school college children would move on and they had lots more other opportunities. And we started looking at a new strategy of engaging children, young people from the communities. And one thing led to the other. Basically, what we have now, you want to talk about the structure, or is it too early?
No, so I think the way the program is now, the root of that was how we began with this youth leadership program. So we identified individuals from communities, one person from a community who we took through a leadership journey of a year-long leadership journey. And through that person, she or he would go back and form a community-based youth group. And that youth group would then address social challenges around them. And so this model was like a peer education model. It was not like we are going into the community to bring change. It was working with young people from that community and enabling them to recognize what needs to change around them, and then supporting them to do that. And that journey. I think the first batch of youth leaders we created in 2007, and then they went back and they formed their youth groups. And at that stage, we were still working with youth. But then we realized that these leaders already had gone through so much challenge in their life that we've spent a long time just healing and working with all the challenges that they were currently dealing with. So the idea slowly it felt logical to move younger and younger. And once we had a few leaders in the community, we started, basically every year we've been going younger and younger.
Our goal is to start at before birth.
But what is the nature? You said when you were dealing with these youth leaders, potential people you were going to mentor, that there was healing involved because of the trauma that they had dealt with even as young people. Just to give us a taste and an understanding of the kind of challenge that you faced, that you had to address using, I guess, your design sensibility and of course your own family backgrounds, your own intuition and your own resources. What were the kinds of challenges that they faced, that they brought to you, that you had to address in order to effect change?
So I think what typical scenario would be that when you were working with an 18-year-old, she had already been through, she had been married, she might have had children, the marriage would have broken up. And so by 19, she would be, a single woman with children to look after, and with a very disillusioned perspective of life. And so that's when we started. And many of them were, once they would get involved in a leadership program, they would start re-picking up the pieces of their life and wanting to go back to education, learn new skills, and open up new pathways for themselves. Right. So I think that's where we felt that, okay, we can't start at 18, we have to start. So the first leap back was when we started, around 12. Saying that, okay,
adolescence
is that's a critical time. And so then that was a big shift. I mean, that became an important part of the journey. And the way the program looks now is that we have these 10 youth groups. Each youth group works with about 150 to 200 adolescents and children in their communities. And they start at 6 when they're 6 years old, and they're with us till they're adults. And they're organized into support groups who meet every week. And we've got this curriculum that explores these. On the screen, you can see like these 12 themes. So it's from self, values, life skills, goals, gender identities, body, all of this. So this curriculum is implemented with young people across, right from when they're 6 to when they're 18, and through games. So each week when they meet, they play games to explore these different issues, and all of this is done through peer educators. So we don't have external trained people going. We've trained young people from these communities.
So these 6-year-olds, when they are 12, will become educators for the 6-year-olds, and the 12-year-olds will, when they become 18, so it goes on like that.
So we have like about.
But the curriculum has been designed by you, and the identification of all these different they look like beehive bits, right? So their life skills, happiness, self, teamwork, empathy, support. So it covers a very broad spectrum, and devising this curriculum must also have taken a fair amount of time, right? And trial and error. What was the method?
Yeah, so we began with sexuality actually, and that was our first very important milestone kit, which in fact maybe we should just go back to that. Yeah, so sexuality was like the first thing that we went into detail with. Here you see maybe the screen before that.
There's no other screen.
Okay. Okay, so here you see the kids playing with tools around learning about their body, about how babies are born, how menstruation happens, how conception happens, and
what's this game on the right where they're grinning and laughing?
Yeah, so this one, right?
Yeah.
So this is a conception model. So you have a piece which is like the ovary, and you have a piece which is like the penis, and the penis part has black and white beads. So you uncork the penis and put it into the vagina, and then you shake it about, and there's a little piece there where the one ball falls in. That means it's fertilization has started happening. And it's just about if it's a boy or a girl. If it's a black bead, then it's a boy. If it's a white bead, it's a girl.
So it's like representing the X and Y chromosomes through color, using white and white, black and black. And so
what kind of responses you got with this?
So this was actually like a landmark kit for us. We developed it in 1995. And this was to basically talk about sex education with kids in communities, and it's a really long journey of, there's been lots of challenges, because initially communities would say that, why do kids need to know about this? Are you implying our children are sexually active? Why do they need to know about contraception? And this is all. So we had to really struggle with continuing this, but because child marriage was common, because there were young girls getting pregnant, and so many, the thing in communities is that because premarital sex is not okay, young people elope, and marriage is the only way to sort of rationalize. Yeah, so sex education was quite critical to the path that how it would influence the lives of young people, because they've got a boyfriend, they've gone and had sex, next thing they feel compelled to get married. Once they're married, they're out of school and their life starts crumbling.
Is most of the work centered on the girl child and women?
So initially, no, I mean, so the girls are definitely a focus, but because we need boys to very much be part of that journey, and so conversations with boys is sort of very much on the cards. But we do support and promote girls' leadership, just so that there are in communities you can visibly see that change. So I think sexuality was how we entered, and over the years, bit by bit, all the other elements got developed. Self, I mean, we also realized that self-worth is the root for a lot of the challenges that happen. So I think self-exploration has been another big pillar in the work, and we've done lots of we've developed lots of tools and processes to help young people explore themselves at right from when they're little to when they're adults. It's a continued journey. And so yeah, so sexuality was how we entered, and then it went into self and life skills and values.
So
and
these themes actually have taken us 8 years of development and many iterations. Right now we have these themes. It's maybe an articulation of the last 2 years. And it makes sense because we can see how they are interconnected and how they are each important and how they are each linked to various behaviors and crises that young people face. And these are things that are not taught in school. So our thing is that it's a bit like rethinking education, that you need values and ethics, you need a community involvement, you need a re-understanding of yourself and reflection and things like that. So yeah, so I think it's a maybe 2-3 years of the last 2-3 years we have come to this. Before that, it would have looked quite different. And one more, just aside on the sex education kit, it was developed by Himalini in 1995. Since then, we estimate, we have never marketed these toolkits. Organizations have come to us. They said, what have you got? And they have taken it. And some other organizations have seen them working and they have ordered from us. We have sold 6,000 such kits, and we estimate about 2 million girls have been exposed to sex education through this toolkit. And you were asking what is this? How do you react with this conception model? Because it's a game. It is not that icky. It's like the penis getting into the vagina and all that. It's all focused on the beads getting into the thing and whether it's a boy or a girl, and it's fun. Parents have seen it and they have not minded it. So that's the kind of twist that we want to. I mean, it's like for every taboo subject we try to.
It's like these are all definitely sexuality. A lot of these things, they're taboo subjects, and that's why I responded to the picture, because I saw the expression on the faces of the girls, so they're clearly totally engaged in the game, and it's a secular presentation of the game in the sense that there's nothing sexual looking about it, particularly like you were describing, and yet you're getting the point across. So really fantastic. Kudos on this one, and I'm sure there are like many more, because can you maybe talk about one or two other games or a case study that's been something that struck you that stands out? And this I'm curious to know about, in the sphere of, you said self. So fine, you start out helping communities because you're looking at sexuality, and you've entered through that door because young girls are in trouble very early in their lives in some way or the other. And you've gone all the way into talking about self and identity, and how do you then develop as designers? I'm coming back to the fact that you're educated to the same extent that I am in terms of the skills we got. And I'm designing books and you're designing curriculums, okay, to change lives. So this theme of the self thing, can you expand on a little bit on how you came to that understanding and then built on it, developed it, that it was required and that it's essential?
So I think the early years, so in fact, my first project when I came out of NID and was with, we were setting up Thought Shop Foundation. was to do with, it was called the Ask columns. These were these newspaper columns on HIV, AIDS and sexuality that would address young people's questions in a mainstream newspaper. And we would get these hundreds of questions from young people on asking about sex and life and whatnot. And this paper, this column, we continued for say about, yeah, so this here you see a glimpse of this. It used to be like a half-page feature in a newspaper, and we would get these questions from young people, and that sort of started giving us a window of what's happening with young people in their minds. And when the column kind of after a year and a half, we ran one issue on same-sex issues, and then the newspaper couldn't handle it anymore and they shut the column down. And this was also in 95 or something. And so then to continue the work, we set up a helpline, and where young people would call in with their questions, and there were counselors responding to it. But I think somewhere we started feeling that we were still going on approaching it from a problem perspective. It's like when somebody has a problem, they come. But then a more constructive approach would have been to sort of build that leadership and build that sense of self, and
Right.
enable young people to actually deal with their issues themselves and make better decisions and things like that.
And for that they need appropriate support systems immediately around them.
Yeah. So I think that's how the idea of self started at that in those early years. And that work then kept developing, and I think somewhere along the line our own experiments in self-exploration through spirituality and through various other processes also helped us feel that, okay, this is very core and central. Like all the other issues are external, but and even if we're doing community work, we want to center our work on the inner person and
The inner experience.
build the inner resources of all the communities and young people that we come in touch with. And it's abstract, but it's like, it felt like the thing that makes sense, that will have a long-term sustainable support.
And also as a Bengali, I think I have grown up with Ramakrishna and Rabindranath Tagore and all that. That's in my bones. So it just makes sense to focus on the inner self. And if we look at all the problems, it feels like multifarious, but through design thinking, you can club it down to, it's not infinite problems. There are finite problems that you need to solve. And if you keep working at it, there's only one problem, which is disillusion of the ego and being one with the universe. So that is the path. So we are halfway, or quarter way to that journey. We have reduced it to 12 now. It has to further reduce.
I think gender is
yeah. So you were talking about my milestone. Hey, we forgot about our batch. We wouldn't have been here without our batch, because many of the things, most of the things are basically from everybody around. Speaking of milestone projects, so we have identified actually gender as, it's like in a chessboard, the 4 squares in the center, which determines what's going on in the rest of the game. Gender is like that. Everything is connected to gender. And so I think around 2003 or 4, we were feeling the need to understand about. So when you were saying that how did we come to this? How did we? So it happened through a bit of luck, because we found the right partnerships. Oxfam helped us, because Oxfam is the leader in gender work across the world. Okay. And they helped us understand the subject area, all the nuances, all the interconnections. And that partnership, I don't know if Himalini is here, but I remember Himalini with partnership with Himalini, gave us the ideal working environment to create the first gender toolkit. So the process was, the problem there we were trying to solve was that Oxfam had these women's pressure groups trying to deal with violence in the community. Some groups were doing it very well, some groups were struggling with it. So we traveled through Bihar and Orissa, understanding what were they doing right and what were some of the sticking points. And we we collected a group of representatives from all these different organizations, and we went through a process of developing the tools in that group. So that was like a design group where we would develop something, test it out in that group, go back, read, iterate over it, and come back. And that was a very lucky environment to be in as designers.
Mm-hmm. These were also people who were working in communities. Some of them were people from a village who were playing a role of a facilitator. And so they brought very, it's a very diverse group who was coming together to create the tool. And you might see in the pictures, in the photographs here, that there are lots of pictures. And I think that is a characteristic of a lot of the work that we've been doing. These are basically pictorial games that we create, which cuts across the whole language barrier. So if you're in a village where people aren't literate and the facilitator is not superior to the group and the dialogue has to be equal, then pictures actually help a huge deal in bridging that gap, so that everybody responds in that conversation as an equal. And people look at the picture and they connect it to an incident or a situation in their own life. And that's how the communication and the dialogue happens. There is no judgment. It's all based on, this is what happened with me. This is how I responded. And people, have a structured way to actually take the conversation forward. And I think this, through our experience over the years working on various issues, creating this picture library is also one bit of work that we feel when we look back 25 years having worked on a range of themes, that we've got like now an enormous picture library. It's almost like a
visual vocabulary.
It's like a visual vocabulary where you have a picture that can be recognized on a situation and will trigger a conversation. And each of these pictures has been crafted, removing unnecessary elements, keeping specific expressions or postures, and crafting each picture. There's a lot of back and forth that happens because, like, what does that body language represent? How are people interpreting it? Is there some unintended meaning happening? And so each picture goes through this kind of, like a back and forth development process, iteration. And in this project, this gender project, this was part of a campaign that we did over 7 years. And it was done across 6 countries. And there were like thousands of partners involved. And this really, this also made us, it wasn't like everybody who was connected with this campaign had to actually examine their own beliefs and attitudes and commit to re-examining, things in their own life and then sharing that with others. And I think so each of these projects has also been like a lot of self-reflection for us.
That is another value of, like, you can't teach something that you do not practice yourself. That's so all these things, we even when our peers are doing it, they go through it first. They examine, and therefore that their understanding of that activity is at a much higher level when they go to talk. And then the thing of non-judgment, empathy, understanding, those things get embodied in that work. So this toolkit was, once the pictures are working, it works across India. So although it was initially developed for Orissa and Jharkhand, we tested it in Rajasthan, we tested it in
south, in the northeast, there was a very conscious process of taking it to a range of different communities to see whether people are going to get
distracted by
distracted, if the person doesn't have exactly the same physical features as their own. But in fact, we found that it works to their advantage because people don't feel cornered or judged.
It is just enough similarity. And also, I think we were going through a period of visual explosion. Like TV was all over the place, so they were watching ads of faces of different kinds and TV serials of different kinds. Then when it comes to taking it to Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, Afghanistan, these were tested by organizations there, and minor modifications were done. But basically it works, and it's been done in Philippines, it's been done in Burma. So it's quite exciting for us to see how the image becomes just a trigger. And so the activity they are doing, for example, here is there is a range of images. They have to sort it. Either they have to sort it, or they have to put it into a sequence, or they identify the odd one out, those kind of activities which engages, in which you apply. It's not just feeling things, but you apply some kind of a rationality. And therefore the meaning emerges not from the facilitator, but from the group. Some kind of. So the facilitator in all our cases is one who stands back and guides the process.
That's why this MGD thing is really stressful for us, because we never have to speak so much. It's usually like, the whole group talks, and we just place a trigger.
If it had been our kind of format, we would have first asked everybody, what do you think? And everybody would say, and we'll say, okay, let's discuss that.
Yeah. No, but then I can tell you that, but looking at these pictures, this picture on the right here with the figures and the cards, and what Himalini, you were saying about nuances and details having been shown, and it taking time to arrive at the appropriate image and now that you have a whole visual library, that's ready is huge work. It's like it's a pictorial alphabet in some ways, so you can construct different kind of stories and different meanings from it, and that's really
exactly. So once this pictorial alphabet was done, we could create a whole range of products with it. And like just this toolkit has spawned, I think, maybe 20 different variations.
Right.
From this toolkit consists of 100 pictures, which are organized into sets of 10, and each of those set of 10 pictures has a game and a discussion linked to it, and one concept related to gender. And so it's typically done over 10 sessions, and each session is like a incremental idea.
And gets more and more, it starts very easy, and then it gets more and more contentious, not contentious, but difficult.
Becomes challenging a little bit
more and more challenging.
And it's designed to be facilitated.
Sorry, challenging in the sense where you come up against yourself when you look at the picture and you have to interpret it. So you're either looking at your own situation or yourself or someone close to you, and you're recognizing, you thought it was okay, but maybe something's off here. That kind of challenge, right?
Yeah. That's right.
And also, so one principle that is often used in the pictures is that imagine yourself in that situation. So imagine if you were a character in the picture, and so that kind of lens helps us, not demean or show anybody in a way that is disrespectful, or somebody might feel like,
So a typical thing of violence against women, showing the perpetrator like an animal, is no for us, because then nobody identifies with that.
Right.
It's like somebody else, not me. But if it is a respectable looking man who's trying to be helpful and then saying that you should not go out because it's for your own good, then it opens up a space.
So you build empathy with even somebody in the group can identify with the perpetrator as well.
That's right.
So that that's
And
another.
that's usually the case in any case. So from the statistics that one sees in the papers, that perpetrators are usually very familiar and in the family, and known and not unknown strangers. Yeah. Okay, we're at 8. We're at 8:20, Sajid. So, Santayan,
We lost the game.
we lost the game. That's okay. But if is there on the work front, because I want to make sure that that part is covered, and then we can quickly go back to NID and end on the high note of time together 25 years ago.
Roma, don't worry about the time. You're going fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So in the work front, let's see, is there any other?
So on the work front, one or two questions I have is, Himalini, you had straight after NID, you had, I think, gone to Delhi and worked with butterflies.
Yeah.
You spoke briefly about that at Street Children, right?
So I think right from my 4th project at NID, and then for the next 5, 6, maybe 7 years, I worked with street children in Delhi. It was like I went there to do one thing, and then there was just so much to be done, and I got sort of embroiled in that whole world. And my first project there involved exploring, creating an exhibition on the world through the eyes of street children. So at the time when this was done, street children were still just being identified as a separate group, a separate community that has issues and whatever. And I won't stress on it. The image here is just like a educational kit, because most street kids, there is a fascinating world that street kids live in, and they live
Fascinating and brutal.
Yeah, I mean, in the sense that they are out of school, they're earning a living, they're 8, 9 years old, they're on the street, they have their shining shoes and selling balloons and doing rat picking. And the organization I was working with then, one of the projects was this thing of how do we, some kind of educational skills, how do we make it attractive enough for the kids to want to come and learn. And so the first thing was this toolkit, which was like a bag of games that the educator would take. He would sit on the pavement, and every day he or she would pull out some game that would be played right on the street. And it had to be attractive enough for the children to come, like drop what they're doing and come and play it and this thing. So in the game, this card game that we see here, that's teaching them the alphabet using film stars, because they were all obsessed with Hindi films.
Celebrities.
And so there was like A for Amitabh, and S for Sanjay, Sanjay Dutt, and all the film stars that they were.
So when we were taking a photograph of this card game, A for Amitabh was missing. So we suspect that somebody has taken it and
because away. They used to collect these film star pictures all the time, and that's how all these games were derived from things that kids were doing all the time. The picture of that Mukabla, the board game on the side, that's like inspired from the film posters. It's Madhuri Dixit and Amitabh Bachchan doing like a fist thing, and it's all the kids would always be playing carom. So the game uses carom strikers to learn numbers and play various mathematical games. And the flashcards on the left was that actually the kids have such rich lives, and so the learning is all actually about exploring their own stories, their own life stories, and building their learning, through exploring their own story. And so that's just a glimpse. So this kit is the first educational toolkit that was made, and this actually then set the pathway for all the other toolkits that happened after this, because it was like a compendium of games. So this was around education, and then after that was sex education, and then all the other various issues. So for me, this was quite a important.
No, and just before, Satan, before, if we're done on the work bit and before we go to NID, so the other theme that seems to come across, Himalini, both with what you culled from your work with street children, is the thing of storytelling, when you said you realize that actually if you want to affect change, then the person needs to identify, and so they have to kind of go into their own story rather than an external story being imposed upon them. So whether they're creating stories using your picture cards or they're telling them, and this whole I think an expression you'd used earlier when we were speaking before this being live on Zoom here was you'd use the expression the power of games, right? And I think you've used you found that you've used the power of games and it's become powerful because you're generating stories from it and people are engaging. Is there anything more you can share about that before we go to your NID years? Just summing up a little bit more on where you're at with the work. Yeah.
We have a whole philosophy on games. We have articulated 4 or 5 things that games do that we want to hold on to and not lose. So one is games are non-threatening. It creates a non-threatening environment. Second is that the facilitator is equal to the players. So it's not like a hierarchy of somebody coming and teaching somebody else. C is, are we going 1, 2, 3? C is...
So games also help you simulate. So it's like often, because you're talking about taboo issues, somebody may not be comfortable sharing their story upfront in a group. But if there's a picture and there's a character going through something, the person can talk about what that character is feeling and thereby share what they are feeling without having to tell everybody that it's their story.
So asking for a friend kind of a thing.
Yeah. So in fact, in the street kids thing also, the street kids all had artificial names. They named themselves after film stars and, they all had fictional stories if you ask them up front. So, but if they're looking at a picture, the kind of things they choose to see and what they what they talk about when they see that picture gives you a clue as to what they're going through. And
so it helps break defenses because, so I mean, there are lots of things about games that we have to, we keep holding on to.
Now only, I think.
Where now?
No, I mean, we can talk about the current work thing now.
Yeah, I think basically we've covered NID. Do you want this? And is there anything useful there? My wheelchair thing. So basically at NID, I, for some reason or the other, and I still don't know how and why, I have always chosen projects related to developmental issues. And I can't put my finger on why that is so. So, for example, from the first design process, when design process was going on, everybody had advanced a lot and I was still lagging behind, still looking for what problem to solve. And I still have that thing of what problem is worth solving. Is, I need to think about that first instead of just, headlong into solving something. Yeah. So I took, I think, 1/3 of the time just to figure out what problem is worth solving. And eventually the thing that I did was a playground for blind and sighted kids to play together using pneumatic construction toys, large size pneumatic construction toys. Now, this was way before integrated education was part of the buzz and all that. I still feel very good about that design process. I think Ranjan encouraged me a lot. And I thought that, okay, I'm on the right path. And since then, For my fourth project, there was Lok Jumbish, a school project. I did a slate desk that children can make themselves and sit in under a tree and study and carry their bags, carry their books in, which I thought was something that I hung on to for a long time in terms of being something that made me feel good. And then the tricycle and all that. The tricycle didn't work. But during the jury, I said, see, I've just had time to make one prototype, but if I were to make another prototype, these are the changes I would make. And thankfully, Kumar Vyas was on the jury.
And he bought it.
Okay, huh?
And he
got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he got it. He said, yeah, that makes sense. You can graduate. So, yeah, I mean, so not everything works until, for especially a complex thing like wheelchair would have taken at least 3 more iterations before it. So, and just to see that with the images, it takes like 2-3 years to get the image.
Yeah.
So, and we are still tweaking the image slightly here and there to make it more universal, to make it more long-lasting, culturally more wider. So,
no, because I guess images are absorbed, are read intuitively. Not, I mean, they're grasped. We don't. So it must be quite challenging and complex to get it right, because figuring out how that's interpreted and how it's perceived in different cultures. And if you've got to a point where there's a universality in terms of what people are recognizing, then that's really a valuable resource. So really fantastic work there, really. Himalini, your NID picture?
No, I think we've talked about stuff.
Sorry?
So the story, I think, is Himalini.
I don't want to talk about that.
Okay. Himalini missed her convocation picture. And so all her friends came together and gave her her own convocation picture. I think this is...
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Himalini is being grumpy now.
Yeah, I don't know why we're discussing this.
Okay, fine. So,
okay.
Santayan, a little bit on the music. The music part. One
so
is,
music.
I remember, since we're talking about the batch, so let me chime in a little bit. One of the, I mean, every batch thinks it's the best, and I'm no less. I think ours is absolutely the best. Okay, but one of the things that I think made it really awesome to be part of the batch was that there was a bunch of musicians and jokesters and happy comedians who kept the vibe really light and high. And I think I definitely was a more serious type, but in the company of Amitabh and Santayan and Sohail and Sanjay, Nattoji and so many, mostly the guys were the jokesters, walking around with their guitars, making up songs. Everyone had a birthday song, you know, whether they liked it or not, and we all loved it and started expecting it. You know, it was due, like Roma's birthday is coming up, so a song was composed, somebody's birthday was coming, and then it was holidays, then this song got still composed and sent to them, something like that. So, you know, I think that that's what was the grease and the glue for all of us to just relax and be easy and really be bond on the lighter things of humor, laughter, and just well-being, love, and our youthfulness also at that stage. So music being an integral part of bonding, and you being the guy who wrote many of those songs and played them, and this skill you've brought into your professional work as a designer as well. And I think artistically you also still do some work. I'm not sure though exactly precisely, you may want to tell us about that. So tell us a little bit about how you made music work for your communities and you know, reach people.
Okay, Himalini is whispering in my ear, don't talk, just play it. No, but basically, very quickly, I think whenever there is some work, if there is some music to be done, I do it quietly and just for my own sake. So if there is a presentation, it needs a background music, I'd rather compose my own music and play something original rather than taking a canned piece. So there have been a few films that, short films or animation films that I have been doing music for. And now we are thinking that actually it has potential to play a lot bigger part. Now with the young people, we are trying to figure out how to get their music and dance, interest in music and dance, heighten that. So recently when we had that Amphan and lockdown, a lot of strife was going on and people were demoralized. We thought that we would sing a song all together and just, brighten up the spirits. So we created a template of a song. All the kids sang, and we got all our friends to sing as far as possible, and put it together in a small what you call a virtual choir. So I have that virtual choir song.
Can you play?
I play it? Yes.
If possible, that'd be great.
Yeah. Where is my screen sharing? Where is my screen sharing? Where will I find screen sharing? Stop share, and now share screen, and this one, and share, and here we go. We'll wait for the credits.
Thank you. That was really beautiful. That really was beautiful. And I'd seen this some time ago and it really was moving. You know, it is moving. And I think this is a fitting, happy, positive, bonded musical note for us to wrap this up on. We've covered, I think, all aspects that need to be talked about. And as far as the work that you're doing in the communities, the fact that it is probably relentless and continuing, so the spirit of we shall overcome may be with you. Secondly, I think you've demonstrated as designers to the community, design community, and hopefully there are many young designers out there who can see that there is awesomely fulfilling, worthwhile, solid work needed to be done in this area, and the scope of it is vast. And being able to, you know, now having people like you who've gone ahead in this area, created a space to it. You can have hopefully many other young designers, bright minds pitching in, building on your picture alphabet and the games, and you know, having them reach more and more people, especially in today's day and age where the divisions within communities between haves and have-nots is getting wider and wider and wider. So I'm really privileged to have you as my batchmates and my friends. And I'm so happy to have hosted you. I'm serious. Lots of love, Himalini and Santayan. Love you tons.
Oh, lots of love, Roma. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sajid.
Thank you, Sajid.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to fantastic session. Thank you so much, Roma, for the way you hosted and took it. I love the format which you did also. Then it was different. The whole gamification of it and going in and out from this is fantastic. I'm going to now get it off live, and sometimes you can see all the faces who are here. It's a fantastic reunion. So the guys who are watching live, see you. Thank you so much for the 47th session.